Mother's Day and Father's Day, we're going to do this series called Questioning Faith. And I think it's going to be a benefit to everybody, whether you're a long-time believer or you're maybe not even a believer at all, or if you're somewhere in between. This series will be a benefit to you. And I chose this title, obviously, intentionally because it helps us. It actually has a double meaning. On the one hand, it talks about how some people question faith altogether. It's the concept itself. Some people question what is faith and is it worth having, right? But then even if you do have faith, we then have questions about it. We have questions about what we believe, questions about what we're supposed to be doing, and how it all makes sense, right? So questioning faith. And I think what is really fascinating to me about faith is that it's something that some people don't have and some people do have. Some people are born with it, if you will, in the sense that they are born into a believing family, a family that has faith, and lo and behold, they have the same kind of faith that their parents had, right? I don't think it's too much of a coincidence. So faith can be something that is passed on. However, other people have no faith at all, and they later come to faith. And how do they do that? We're going to look at that. So what I want to ask us today, just to begin, is it okay to question faith? Is it okay? Is it permissible? Is it acceptable? Is God mad at us if we even question the concept of faith? And I think my hope today is that with this message, that after this message and after this series, that you will see that it is actually perfectly acceptable to question not only your faith, but then to have a questioning kind of faith. The kind of faith where you can ask questions and nobody has a problem with that. It's not looked down upon to ask questions, even if you have faith. So, it's acceptable and healthy. I hope that you will see that it is acceptable and healthy to have a kind of faith where questions are allowed. And get this, that then you will be perhaps, and I think we're going to close with this, that you will see that this might be a way to reach out to people who don't yet have faith. That letting people know that it's okay to question things might be a way to get people to begin that process to have faith, to build their faith. So, I just realized though, we haven't yet defined faith, right? What is faith? Faith is one of those words we use in church, and we just all assume we all know what it means. Is everybody here confident that they know what it means when we say the word faith? There's actually a few different meanings to the word. And the one meaning is sometimes it refers to the whole thing. Like everything we believe, everything we do. The faith. That's how Jude used the term in Jude chapter 1 verse 3. He said, the faith which was once for all handed down to the saints. He's talking about the whole thing. He's talking about everything we believe, everything we do as it relates to God and the Bible and so on. That's called the faith. That's not how I'm going to use the word today. Sometimes, maybe. You might catch me that I might use the word that way. But today I want to give us a really basic definition of the word faith. And here it is. Faith refers to our positive response to God. Positive response to God, right? And I actually have 3 ways of breaking that down. Number 1, believe in God, believe God, and then live out those beliefs. So we're going to unpack those today. Firstly, believe in God. Because before anything else, you have to believe in God. You have to believe God exists. Look what it says. Without faith, in Hebrews 11:6, without faith, it is impossible to please Him, to please God. The person who approaches God must have faith in 2 things. Look at this. First, that God exists. And secondly, that it is worth his while to try to find God. So having faith firstly means that you believe God exists. And for many people, that's easy. Who finds it easy to believe in God? Anyone here? Right? Some people find it really easy to believe in God for one reason or another. They've never asked themselves that question of whether or not God exists. And they either have never done that or don't care to, right? And for them, it's really easy to believe that God exists. But guess what? There are other people out there who find it difficult to believe that God exists. There are a few reasons why some people might find it difficult to believe that God exists. Number 1, they see a lot of terrible things happen in the world, and they can't understand how a God could exist that allows all that to happen, right? Number 2, they're really into science. They appreciate science, they know science, and then therefore they don't really understand how God fits into that, right? They have an explanation for where the universe came from. They have an explanation for where life and how we developed into where we are today, right? People who are into science have those explanations. They don't really see a need for God. And number 3, if you're really into philosophy, you might have some philosophical reasons why you don't believe in God. In fact, some people might not even understand how God could exist, right? So there are various reasons why some people don't believe in God. So that's the first hurdle. If you can't believe in God, then what are you doing with faith, right? That's a hurdle that people have to get over. But let's say that you do believe in God. You believe that God exists, and it's worthwhile to go to him and to search him out. You then must believe what God has said, right? So you have to believe God. You have to believe what God has said. And the Jewish people believe what God has said. For example, they believe that the whole Hebrew Scriptures, what we would call the Old Testament, that is God speaking to people, right? God spoke to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, their forefathers. God spoke to them and gave them promises. And then God took them and developed them, and then eventually they got to Mount Sinai. And God spoke again to Moses, and he gave them, as we looked at earlier, he gave them the commandments, his way of life, the instructions that he wanted them to live out. And we believe that too, as Christians. As Christians, we believe in what God has spoken to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, to Moses, through the prophets, and so on. We believe in the Hebrew Scriptures. But we also believe that all of that has to be understood in light of the person of Jesus, who we believe is the Messiah. And it says this in Hebrews chapter 1, verse 1. This is really important. And this is a paraphrase, but nevertheless, I think it accurately, gets the sense of the meaning. God, who gave our forefathers many different glimpses of the truth in the words of the prophets, has now, at the end of this present age, given us the truth in the Son, who is Jesus. So faith in God is now measured by how much we respond to Jesus, how much we believe in what he said and did. I was reading one of my favorite dictionary. It's the Dictionary of Jesus and the Gospels. And look at what it says here. The Old Testament understanding of faith is sustained in Jesus. What is new about Jesus is that with his coming, faith in God, look at this, faith in God becomes faith in his special emissary, Jesus, his representative, Jesus, who faithfully accomplishes God's will in bringing salvation to his people. Don't you like how he put that there? That faith in God, when Jesus came on the scene, now faith in God looks like not only believing in God, but believing in his representative, Jesus. That's why Jesus said, believe in God, believe also in me, right? See that distinction there? Just want to make note of that. But, again, as I'm sure you all know, plenty of people don't believe in God. They don't believe in the words found in Scripture that are attributed to God, or the words found in Scripture that are attributed to Jesus. They don't believe in it. They don't think that they're true. In fact, many people doubt the miracles, and the greatest miracle, the resurrection of Jesus. They doubt it. And so they don't believe that we should be believing anything that they say. Why believe in what they say if those things aren't true, right? So believe in God, believe God, but now you must also live out those beliefs. So let's say somebody does believe in the words of God, especially as spoken through his Son Jesus. Is that enough to say that they have faith? That you believe in God, that he exists, you believe in the words of God and Jesus. Is that enough? No. In order to have true, genuine faith, you also have to live out your beliefs. The fact that you believe in what God has said and what Jesus has said. Even if you're a biblical Unitarian, even if you believe God is one, that's not enough to say that you have true saving faith. Look at this. James said, you believe that God is one. You do well. But the demons also believe and they shudder. Now, the demons do not have true saving, genuine faith. They know about God, but it's not enough. What you must also do is then take your belief, as right as it might be, and live it out. And then it's true faith. I always like this. It comes from the text that I referenced earlier, Acts chapter 2, where they were there on the day of Pentecost. And Peter gives that great message, and it says this, when the people heard this, They were pierced to the heart. And they said to Peter and to the rest of the apostles, look at this, brothers, what shall we do? You see that question? What shall we do? It wasn't enough for them to simply believe what Peter had said about Jesus, about how he had died and rose again and he was returning soon. It wasn't enough. They had the right question. What should we do? And that's because from a Jewish perspective, faith is not just what you believe, it's what you do. Actually, what you do is more important because it really shows you that you believe. So our faith is in no way disconnected from our behavior. Does that make sense? Our faith is in no way disconnected from our behavior. You know, you might have heard that God doesn't require anything from you in order to be saved. In order to embrace his salvation, God doesn't require anything from you. You don't have to do anything. It's kind of true. But I want us to understand exactly what that means. Now, it's true that we don't have to earn God's grace and his love. There's nothing that we can do that will make him or like move him towards us in his love and grace. His love and grace are a free gift to us. We don't have to do anything for it. But it's not correct to say that we don't have to do anything in order to be saved. We have a lot to do. It's our whole life responding to him in what we believe and in what we do, right? And all throughout the Bible, we're given example after example of what true saving faith looks like. And that is always a response through action. We respond to God through our actions. If you're not responding through your actions, you don't have genuine faith. And this makes sense. Because if you think about it, everything that we believe, or rather everything that we do, comes as a result of something that we believe. Virtually everything that we do comes as a result of some belief. We get up, go to work each day. Why? Because we want to, or we just like to, maybe. But we expect some sort of compensation for our work, right? You believe that you will be paid. And so you do the work. Does that make sense? What about just something as simple as you want to go somewhere, so you hop in your car, turn it on, and you drive to that place. Now, you're getting in your car and you're doing all the things you need to do because you believe that car will bring you there, right? You wouldn't just sit, outside of your car and have nothing happen. You get in your car and it moves you, it brings you to the place. And your action is a result of your belief that car will bring you there. These are just two basic examples. You can think of anything in your life, right? Of what we do is a result of something we believe. A man is justified before God by what he does as well as by what he believes. You see how he's talking about both? You have to believe and do. Faith actually more so refers to your actions, right? Belief and action go hand in hand. You can't have one without the other. Our actions are the evidence. Our actions are the evidence of our beliefs. I just mentioned that just a moment ago I gave you those two examples. There are parallels between everyday things when it comes to faith. Parallels between everyday things and faith. Simply having a belief and then living out that belief through your actions. But what marks faith out as different from everyday actions is God, right? I don't need to believe in God to get in my car and go do what I need to do. I don't need to believe in God to go to work and get paid, right? What's the difference? Well, we're talking about believing in God. It's what I just mentioned a few moments ago. Believing in God, and then living out those beliefs. And this is the way the writer to the Hebrews put it. And this is our memory verse for this week. Faith is the assurance of things hoped for, the conviction of things not seen. Hebrews 11 verse 1. That's in the New American Standard Bible. That's the translation I always use whenever I preach. But I've been reading the Phillips version lately, and it's bringing some things out that I think help us to make sense of some of these passages. Look what it says in the Phillips version of 11:1. Now, faith means putting our full confidence in the things we hope for. It means being certain of things we cannot see. I would say that's an ideal statement, right? That putting your full confidence in the things we hope for and being certain of the things we cannot see, that is the ideal, if this was a perfect world, that's what every one of us, that's how we would explain faith and live out faith. But I want us to catch something here. That this is our confidence in the things that we hope for, things that we cannot see. And that's why I think faith and hope are intricately connected. Faith and hope are incredibly connected. We cannot see God. We can't see God. And we do not see Jesus. We don't see the kingdom among us and around us in terms of the literal kingdom. We don't see the fulfillment along those lines of all the great promises that God made to his people, right? We see them in part and we see certain things, of course, but not in its fullness, right? So what does that mean? We don't yet see them. It's what we hope for. And Paul even said that hope is only hope when it's something that you do not yet see, right? Who hopes for what they already have? So we hope for God to be real and for Jesus to have done all that he has said, that the Bible says he has done and will do, right, in the kingdom and beyond. So our faith, expressed through our action, is an indication that we hope for something that is not yet a reality, but we believe and hope that it will be a reality one day. And it is to a degree. But look at what this commentary, it's just one commentary I found. It says, true faith infers the reality of objects believed in and hoped for. True faith infers the reality of those things that we believe in and hope for. Or as Paul said, look what Paul said, we walk by faith and not by sight. Does that mean we don't do anything by sight? Of course we do things by sight, by what we can observe. But in terms of faith, in terms of what we believe in and hope for, that's how we walk. That's how we live out this life that God has given us, by faith. So, we hope. We live in such a way that assumes the things we hope for are and will be a reality. However, we have to ask this. And I'll put it to you this way again, just to reiterate. We believe in and we act in accordance with the hope that we have. That's our faith. We believe in and act in accordance with what we hope for. We can't see God. We do not see the future he's promised us. But we live as if God and the kingdom were as obvious as my face, as you seeing my face today. As obvious as anything that we can point to. We live as if those things were obviously real and in front of us. But that asks, or somewhat leads to this question is, but do we have good reason to believe and hope for those things? Are what we believing and hoping for true? Well, what is truth? What is truth? And I've defined this for us before, but if you're newer to our church, I hope this makes sense. Truth, I think, refers to any idea or concept or statement that accurately describes reality, what actually exists. I'll put it this way. Something is true regardless of what we believe, regardless of what we feel or what we hope for. Something is true regardless of us. It's outside of us. It's objective. So, are Christians, are we deluding ourselves to believe in all the great things that we believe in? Right? Are we deluding ourselves? You know what? Skeptics, there are a lot of skeptics out there who would say, yes, we are. We are deluding ourselves. What we believe in is based on a baseless hope. It's not a real hope. It's a false hope. There's nothing that we can do to objectively prove all these things are true. And in fact, these kinds of skeptics will always be disappointed because they're looking for scientific proof for God's existence. Do you know that? Skeptics are looking for scientific proof for God's existence, and they're always going to be disappointed. Now, I'm going to get to this in a moment. That doesn't mean there aren't things we can't point to, but let me say this. The supernatural God will never be detected by the natural. You know what I mean? In a scientific way. It won't make sense to them. It won't work. So, belief in God is what? It's not the same as belief in science and math and things like that. It's not the same. We're not talking about the same thing. Because science and math and all these things, they're with the world around us. They have to do with the world around us, observing the world around us and calculating and understanding the world around us. And you can't get to God that way. God must reveal himself to us, and therefore, belief in God is a matter of faith, believing in his revelation. And who is the revelation of God? The person of Jesus, right? So, the reality of life in this age, and that doesn't mean that one day God won't be incredibly as obvious to everybody as anything else, but life in this age, the reality is is that it is based on our hope. It is a matter of faith. But, as I just alluded to a moment ago, that doesn't mean there aren't things there are things that we can point to that will help us build our faith. Specifically, there are philosophical, scientific, and even historical things that we can point to that do lead many people to conclude that it is reasonable to have faith in God. There are many ways of making sense of theology that will help those who have a skeptical mind to feel like faith in God is something that they can embrace. That we aren't embracing something that's contradictory, right? So many people believe that our faith in particular is contradictory, but what we're working on is to show people, no, that's not the case. There's a way to understand our faith that has it make total sense. Maybe not total sense, but a lot of sense, right? There's still things we're working on. But there are lots of skeptics out there, as I said. And in fact, there was a guy named Edward Boyd. And he, in this book, Letters from a Skeptic, we read of his journey of being an unbeliever and becoming a believer. And who is Edward Boyd? Well, he's the son of a pastor and a theologian that I love, Gregg Boyd. And he's the author of the book. The book is a series. So what did I say? He's the son of. Gregg Boyd is the son of Edward Boyd. And Gregg Boyd is a pastor and theologian. And this book is a series of letters between them. And Edward is asking his son questions about the Christian faith. And Gregg is giving him answers. And eventually he gets to the place where he believes in God and he believes and becomes a believer. But look at some of the questions that he asked. These are just some of the highlights. He asked, why believe in God in the first place? Why is the world so full of suffering? Why has Christianity done so much harm? Look at this, why didn't God spare your mother? Why trust the Gospels? How can you believe that a man rose from the dead? Right? Why does God make believing in him so difficult? Why is it so difficult to believe in God? Like I said, for some of you it's not that difficult, but for others it's really difficult. Why do you think the Bible is inspired? How could an all-loving God torture people in an eternal hell? How can another man's death pardon me? And lastly, how can I be sure it's all true? In fact, that was the last question he asked, and Gregg answered it, and because of Gregg's answer, he declared, I believe. I believe. I am a believer. Now, what if there were good answers to all of these questions? What if there were answers that make sense? Maybe they're not 100% satisfying, but they are good answers. They lead someone and move someone towards faith, towards embracing faith. In fact, as I said, it was because of Gregg's answer to that final question, how can we be sure it's all true? Right? I'll put it back here on this next screen. How can we be sure it's all true? It was because of that answer to that question that Edward Boyd embraced faith. But at the heart of this question, how can we be sure it's all true, is this issue of certainty and doubt. How certain do I have to be? I really want us to all think about this. So listen to me carefully. How certain do I have to be in order to have genuine faith? Have you ever thought about that? How certain are you about all this stuff? Are you 100% certain? Are you 80% certain? Are you 10% certain? Right? How certain do you have to be? Well, Gregg Boyd, who I admire, in Letters from a Skeptic and his book, Benefit of the Doubt, he says that you don't have to be certain about any of it. Because certainty is not a requirement for faith. You know what I mean? 100% certainty, being absolutely sure of all these things, is not what God requires of us. What does God require of us? That we enter into a relationship with Him through His Son Jesus. Amen? God wants us to enter into a relationship with Him. And in a relationship, you're not always 100% certain about the other person, are you? You see how relationship can include doubts. It's not antithetical to faith in that sense, to having a relationship. It's a matter of over time, you get to know the other person. Your questions are there, but they're not as relevant. Or maybe you find good answers for them. Or other things replace those questions, right? They're not as important, as I said. So guess what? When it comes to our faith in God, our relationship with God can include doubts. It's okay. You can doubt whether or not God exists, right? You can doubt whether or not the Bible is true. You can doubt whether or not Jesus is who he said he was and what he has done. You can doubt those things, but don't let it stop you from having faith. Don't let it stop you from being in relationship, because you can have doubts. You can ask questions. God doesn't mind. It's okay. Because guess what? It is through those questions, in fact, finding answers, or just by the process of questioning, that in fact your faith will build up. Far from thinking that your questions will lead you away from faith, I happen to believe that, especially if you're with a group of people who are supporting you in that pursuit, questions will lead you more and more towards God. And we see this in the Bible. The man who had the muted son, the son who was muted, who was a mute, he said, "I do believe," to Jesus. Remember that? I do believe. But then what did he say? What did he say? "Help my unbelief." Isn't that a contradiction? No, it's not a contradiction. Because in some ways, I do believe. I believe. And in other ways, I have some doubts. That's okay. If your prayer to God is, "I believe," but also, "I want you to help my unbelief," the parts of me that don't quite believe. So I want you to believe. I want all of us to believe, but to also not be afraid of our doubts. Don't let your doubts overtake you. Instead, ask God to help you. And as I just alluded to, it's a lot easier to have that kind of faith, to have the kind of faith where questions are acceptable when you're part of a congregation that won't judge you for it, right? Here at Glad Tidings, we, I think, believe in this kind of faith. There are some churches out there are some people out there who would say that, nope, faith is being absolutely certain. I agree with the Phillips translation, that faith is being absolutely certain of what you hope for. Well, again, I think that's well and fine. That's a great ideal to strive toward. But if you have doubts, it's okay. And you know what? We're on a journey together. I have my doubts, you have your doubts, but we all come together and we learn together and we grow together. Our vision statement is to go deeper, right? We want to go deeper. And you can't go deeper if you're not allowed to ask questions, right? So don't be afraid to ask questions about faith or about your faith, right? We want to encourage that. We want to hopefully help you to answer those questions and to grow in your faith.